Every now and again, I get a comment on an old video randomly saying something along the lines of, wow, this aged like milk. Like this guy who thinks my video about how the Shroud of Turin is fake aged like milk. Or this guy who thinks my video about the thoroughly debunked UFO incel guy aged like milk. Or this guy who thinks my video about how vaccines are safe and effective age like milk. Every time I happen to notice one of these random comments, I do a Google search to see, what might have occurred, what may have come to light to prove me wrong. And generally, I get nothing. Jesus has not come down from heaven to confirm the truth of the Shroud of Turin. Aliens have not landed on the White House lawn. Billions of people have not suddenly dropped dead from getting the COVID vaccine 4 years ago. But sometimes I suddenly get a lot of aged like milk comments all at once, which does indicate that something somewhere must have happened. For instance, in February, a bunch of mangry commenters posted aged like milk on my video about Blake Lively's claim that Justin Baldoni sexually harassed her and hired the same PR firm as Johnny Depp in order to slander her in the press. So I searched, and sure enough, something did happen. Baldoni had just filed a countersuit against Lively and the New York Times, who originally reported on Lively's complaint. Wow, I guess my video really did age like milk. A countersuit means that the person who filed it is automatically in the right, even if a judge dismisses it in its entirety just a few months later. I feel like those comments aged like something, but I can't think of what. Anyway, the most recent outpouring of aged like milk comments have been directed towards my video from last November about how liberals were claiming that Donald Trump stole the election, with their only evidence being a claim from a man named Stephen Spoonemore, a man who had previously argued that George W. Bush stole the 2004 election, who did not have access to ballots but still insisted that there were hundreds of thousands of people who voted in swing states who voted for Trump and no one else. Something he literally cannot know and which wouldn't even be suspicious if it were true. So, what recently happened to get all of these people proudly dunking on my take? Did Stephen Spoonemore come forward with more data? Did someone else validate his claims? No, and no. It turns out that Spoonemore and his claims from last November have little to nothing to do with this latest drama. In fact, Spoonemore hasn't even bothered to update his Substack as of this recording with the latest news. But yes, I'm sure the YouTube commenters are correct, and this latest news will turn out to completely vindicate him. Okay, so what did happen? Well, much like the men's rights activists commenting on my Blake Lively video thought, the Blue Anon Army has confused filing a lawsuit with proving something happened. Last month, a nonpartisan election security firm called Smart Elections released a press release announcing that they had filed a lawsuit questioning the accuracy of the 2024 presidential and Senate election results in Rockland County, New York. You may wonder, on what grounds did they file this lawsuit? Did they gain access to ballots, revealing that voters who said they voted for Kamala Harris had their votes changed to Donald Trump? Like, they need some evidence, right? Well, first of all, no, you don't need any evidence of anything to file a lawsuit. You can file a lawsuit against anything. All you need is enough money to pay the filing fees. But in this case, no. The lawsuit has actually very little to do with Kamala Harris or Donald Trump as well. In fact, the only part of this lawsuit that mentions Harris and Trump simply repeats the same claims that Spoonemore made but mapped onto New York. Surely no one would have voted for Trump but no other candidates down ballot, right? No one would have voted for a Democratic congressperson and not voted for Kamala Harris, right? The answer to both questions is, of course they would. This is a well-known phenomenon, and the results in this election are well within the bounds of what we would expect based on every election for the past 30 years. If you want more information on that, I encourage you to go watch my spoiled milk video from last November because I cover it in detail. There is one thing that is not mentioned in this lawsuit, but I do see it mentioned alongside the lawsuit on social media, including on Smart Election social media. So let me quickly address this before moving on. It's the idea that the vote must have been rigged because in one district, Ramapo District 35, Kamala Harris received 0 votes, yet the Democratic candidate for Senate, Kirsten Gillibrand, won with 331 votes. How could that have possibly happened? Well, as PolitiFact pointed out back in February, this actually happens in nearly every election because that district and 3 others are entirely made up of Orthodox and Hasidic Jews, who all vote as a bloc as recommended by their rabbis, which Gillibrand knows, and so she spent years building a relationship with those communities, and that's why she wins there. Harris did not give a single fuck about these communities, and that's why they did not give a single fuck about her. Mystery solved. But anyway, all of that is just window dressing. As I said, that's not even mentioned in the lawsuit. The actual thrust of this lawsuit and the new evidence put forward is this. In New York District 39, 6 people signed affidavits saying that they voted for Diane Sare for Senate, while the district only showed 5 people logged as voting for her. And in District 62, 3 people signed affidavits saying they voted for Diane Sare for Senate, despite the district only logging 2 votes. This lawsuit is in fact alleging that 2 people said that they voted for Sare and did not have their votes counted. Two people. This may not shock you to hear, but Smart Elections is not the only petitioner here. They are joined by Diane Sare and 2 people who say that they voted for her. But don't worry, because Sare insists that she knows she can find more people who will say that they voted for her, since she managed to find these 2 simply by going down her block and asking a few neighbors. Knock, knock. Hi, it's me, your neighbor, Diane, from 2 houses down. Here, I brought cookies. Hey, dumb question, but you voted for me in the last election, right? Yeah, of course. That's what I thought. Thank you. Oh, you're not just saying that to get me off your doorstep, right? You actually did. Okay, yeah, just checking. Okay, thanks. My lawyer will be in touch. So I know what your next thought is. Who the fuck is Diane Sare? Great question. Diane Sare ran in that election as an independent under the label of LaRouche. Now, I suspect that for at least a quarter of my viewers, that name is enough for you to let out a hearty laugh, go make a cup of coffee, and literally never think about this court case or this conspiracy theory again. Godspeed. For the rest of you, let me tell you who Lyndon LaRouche was. Lyndon LaRouche was an old-school radical right anti-Semite before it was cool, who understood, even before most Republicans, that you don't need to have a lot of voters on your side if you have shit tons of money and questionable integrity. LaRouche originally tried gaining ground in leftist circles, but by the 1960s and 70s, he had switched over to the far right and built a cult around enacting violence upon leftist groups, possibly because he was a paranoid lunatic who fell for FBI propaganda that claimed leftist leaders were secretly CIA agents and informants. For instance, in 1973, he launched Operation Mop-Up, convincing his followers to find communist groups and beat the shit out of them with nunchucks. Yeah, nunchucks. Also bats and stuff, but nunchucks. He was able to convince his followers to do this using the classic cult brainwashing tactics, but the especially ironic part is that he and his followers were obsessed with being brainwashed by secret agents, as detailed in sociologist Stephen A. Kent's report on brainwashing. Brainwashing hysteria quickly spread through the LaRouche organization, former member Paul Kakprzak says. He attended LaRouche meetings in the United States where there were people writhing on the floor saying, "I've been brainwashed, somebody deprogrammed me." The account of another former member, however, indicated that the LaRouche group itself might have been doing the brainwashing. Former member Michael Scott Winstead recounted the circumstances that led to his own departure from the movement. One day, a member of LaRouche's inner circle of advisors was giving a lecture when he touched upon a favorite topic in the movement, brainwashing. He mentioned a 1957 book on the subject, Battle for the Mind. Curious, Winstead tracked track down the book at a library. Various types of belief can be implanted in people after brain function has been sufficiently disturbed by accidentally or deliberately induced fear, anger, or excitement, the author William Sargent wrote. Of the results caused by such disturbances, the most common one is temporarily impaired judgment and heightened suggestibility. Chinese communists spread their gospel, the author noted, through psychological conditioning, inventing enemies, isolating trainees in special locations, keeping them exhausted by performing demeaning tasks, and learning difficult new terminology, using informers to keep people tense and uncertain, and forcing them to sever ties with family and friends, even encouraging their recruits, as Hitler had, to denounce their parents. Winstead felt ill, he says. I sat there and read exactly what I had been going through for the last 6 months. It, i.e. his involvement in the LaRouche group, definitely had worked on me quite a bit, more than I'd like to admit to myself then or now. Now, I've skipped a lot of LaRouche lore for the sake of brevity, but here are a few additional facts. He and his supporters went to prison in the mid-'80s for mail fraud, conspiracy to commit mail fraud, and tax evasion. A KKK leader once called him a racist, complimentary. He called the Queen of England a drug dealer, and he has inspired far-right fascist groups that continue to operate around the world today. And of course, one of those countries is the United States, where he inspired Diane Sare to represent what the New Republic in 2019 called one of the country's most successful homegrown fascist movements in running for Senate against Chuck Schumer, declaring her main qualification to be her 32-year association with the greatest economist and statesman the United States has yet produced, the late Lyndon H. LaRouche Jr. TNR points out that she only got 0.5% of the vote and was routed by blank ballots, but winning elections was never really the point for the LaRouches, even in their heyday. And so it was inevitable that she would run again in 2024, and with no hope of winning, what was her goal exactly? And what was the goal of challenging the election results? One can only guess, but considering that she did upload this video celebrating Kamala Harris's loss to Trump, I think we can safely say that she isn't truly concerned that Trump and Elon Musk rigged the election so Harris would lose.
Hello, everybody. It is November 6th. Indeed, a very historic day after the election yesterday, which happily was not close or not that close. We know the results. We know that Kamala Harris, otherwise known as Liz and Dick Cheney, puppet of the British Empire and the neocons, was defeated, and that we have an incoming president, Donald Trump, who has promised to end the forever wars and who has a rather interesting coalition with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and others.
And considering that in that same video, she complains that the U.S. electoral system silences fringe candidates like herself, I feel pretty confident in stating my opinion that she is cynically jumping on board Blue Anon's conspiracy train in the hopes that it will elevate the LaRouche cult to the national stage where they can finally be taken seriously, win elections, and get a starring role in the current fascist takeover that they laid the groundwork for 60 years ago. In looking over all of this, I find that the age-like-milk comments on my previous video about fake election fraud claims to be particularly ironic, because in that video, I clearly state that I wanted that conspiracy to be found to be true, and that even though the evidence presented in November was baseless and unconvincing, I would be happy to affirm that it's all true, or likely to be true, or plausibly true, if the hand counting ended up supporting that conspiracy, as the conspiracy was spreading before voting was even over and the results certified. The hand count did not support it, and no one has been able to present any evidence that the 2024 election was stolen via vote switching and outright fraud. And so I fall back to my default position. Donald Trump is president because most Americans who were able to vote and were interested in voting voted for him. And that's fine, because unlike conspiracy theorists, I don't mind being wrong, because I haven't made my entire personality the 2024 election was definitely not stolen. I value critical thinking, and that means acknowledging my own biases, evaluating the evidence, and going where the evidence points, regardless of what I want to be true.
Outside? Do you want to go outside?
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.